Actually, the only reason you're on is to help pressure other family members into listening to this. So. All right, Mom actually texted us while we were talking. So just, see that there's Mom right there. Can't wait to hear the. Oh, look at drumsticks.
Pressure's on. I'll get editing immediately.
You got to turn this around tonight, right? She's like, I'll wait until you can send me the link. Yeah.
She's sitting up by the computer. Welcome to this week's episode of the Cool Dad Shirt Podcast.
Yeah, so today we have our second guest, and live from the city of brotherly love is my brother Matt. Welcome.
Hey guys, great to be here, and I was not coerced in any way, as I'm here in my own free will. I believe I have to acknowledge that.
He read
Rich,
the
I'm sure you properly vetted out our next guest.
I know a little bit of his history, so I think we're okay. But, you know, our last guest, like you just said, he put a hockey rink in his backyard. As a hockey player yourself, Matt, have you ever had the inclination to put a rink in your backyard?
So not my personal backyard. It actually gets a little too warm down here in Philadelphia. We don't quite get the sustained cold throughout the whole winter, so I don't think it would work here. But so anyways, there was a period where we did actually experiment at our house, Rich. You weren't there at the time, but we tried it one winter. So our dad initiated this, and so yeah, I was a hockey player since I was 4 years old. So we did the whole thing, but there was no real kits or anything at the time. So we were building up just stray wood in the backyard, and it was one of those, again, sort of unusual winters. Never really froze enough. It was a total disaster. And then you had this enormous amount of water.
And unintended consequences.
Unintended consequences, yeah, all very well intentioned, but it didn't quite work out. So we lost all enthusiasm for ever trying that again. There was just too many variables outside of your control, and so.
It was a good engineering exercise, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, true.
It was. Yeah, it was quite the life lesson on many levels. Yeah, so Matt, Mike and I got talking, and we were chatting about other things, and the topic of coffee came up. And as you make your way through adulthood, you need to learn how to appreciate some finer things. And we got chatting about different ways you can make coffee. Sadly, I did not come to coffee until I think it was like age 42. I had somebody explain to me, stop trying the stuff at work and actually go get a good cup of coffee. And so we wanted to have you on the show because you're a bit of a connoisseur. You've taken a travel into that direction and learned a bunch of things along the way. And what can you tell us about your journey into great coffee?
Sure. So I guess I would say, like many people, started out out of purely utilitarian purposes. So in college, you're just trying to stay awake. And then interestingly enough, I moved to New York City after college. This was 1997. That was my first experience in a city where there was ample coffee shops and there was a culture of coffee. Getting a sense of meeting people, being there alone, music, just the kind of lifestyle and the kind of New York City atmosphere. So that got me kind of hooked on the kind of cultural aspect of it, the kind of environment, atmosphere that kind of came with it, and there was ample great coffee everywhere. For me, the transition started to happen when we left New York. So my wife and I moved from New York to Philadelphia. I went to graduate school here and decided, hey, let's go to Rome for a couple of weeks. Let's go to Italy. Went to Rome and Florence and got to experience the kind of espresso lifestyle, cappuccinos, that whole kind of coffee culture of Italy. So a little cliched, but no doubt just fantastic way to get a kind of a different sense of the kind of European exposure to it. And so we came back, and I was like, gosh, I want to learn how to brew espresso. This sounds like a great, interesting thing. Went on eBay, found what's called a La Pavoni, this little lever Italian-made machine, and started experimenting at home. And got pretty good, got okay with it. And then it wasn't really until my daughter was born. We received from my father-in-law, my wife's dad, purchased us one of those food processors for like making your own baby food at home.
Okay, more tools. Yeah, nice.
Lovely gift. I'm a total gearhead too. I love a well-made gift. So it's from Williams-Sonoma. We're like, wow, this is great. And then my wife and I looked at each other like, there's no way we're making baby food at home. Like, this is just not going to happen, right? This is, let's be honest with ourselves. We're just not that disciplined or that organized to do it. So we went to Williams-Sonoma to return it, and gosh, there's this beautiful espresso machine there. And I'm like, this is kind of interesting. And maybe I should get back into this. And the beauty, so this was an espresso machine, which is all kinds of things we can talk about that, the aspect of the pods and the quality, but the convenience can't be beat.
How do you feel about people who pronounce it espresso?
Well, that's just wrong. I mean, are you the kind of person that goes to a library to get books?
It's funny. I actually saw at a coffee shop once, it says, "We reserve the right to not serve anybody who pronounces it espresso." So I try to get the word out.
Espresso is just a way to brew coffee. So I think people also get mixed up. Like espresso is not a coffee, like a form of coffee, a type of coffee. Because sometimes on a bag of coffee, you'll see espresso. It just means it's kind of optimized for that brew method. But anyway, so we picked up an espresso machine, and the beauty of it was that I could do it all one-handed. So when a newborn is born, I drew the short straw, so I was up early. So I'm always holding this baby, and I could make it in a latte entirely out of one hand. So that got us through the first few years of early childhood, and then in 2015 is when I made the real investment. And this is the part that Rich is getting at, so I have more or less a kind of commercial style setup, fully plumbed in. I've got a dedicated water supply, a finely tuned minerals to make the most optimal tasting water. I've got a drain line. I've got, I up the ampage to the outlet so I can run the boilers hotter at a commercial scale. So.
Are you seriously? You did electrical work for this?
Oh yeah. Plumbing work, electrical work. Installed a reverse osmosis water system with a dedicated filter line just for coffee. The coffee line, so that's, Then there's no scale. I don't have to do any descaling. It's all perfectly balanced, the water ratio. And so that's where it got really serious. So that's when it transitioned from, into really a hobby. And it became something I actually kind of studied. I practiced.
The 20,000 reno in the kitchen, still not even hobby level.
Yeah. Oh yeah, this is now I'm hobby level. Yeah,
we just put 20 grand into redoing the kitchen, but it's still not even of the level of hobbyist.
Yeah. Well, we got a lot of different thresholds, I guess.
Well, did anything go wrong in that process? That's quite a logistical endeavor. Do you have any fun stories?
Not actually. I don't know about anything went wrong. It was pretty well researched. I will say there's some great, anything you kind of start to become obsessive about, you realize there's like a bunch of other people also obsessing about it, right? There's this wonderful site called barista.com. And it is a set of forums that if you're into coffee or you want to learn more about it, a place to ask questions, but I mean, it is just an obsessive level. So I was able to, in my kind of way, be exceptionally prepared and well organized with what we were about to do. There were some, there's a few hacks along the way, but nothing totally crazy.
Yeah, my brother doesn't half-ass anything. That's
so the kids are eating Gerber out of the jar, and Matt is brewing a fine,
exceptional coffee. Yeah. That's pretty much our parenting style in a nutshell. But yeah, I will say, I've got my wife's fully trained on it. She operates it entirely herself. My daughter, I've trained her on it. So what you find is when you have a kind of commercial size.
When you say trained, where do you start? Like first, she writes the order down. The next level is just grinding the beans. You don't touch the machine. We put you on grinding for a few weeks. How does that process work? Walk us through that, Matt.
It's pretty close. So there are a number of key elements. You're looking at all the ratios of water to the grind size to time. There's a time component to this whole thing. So the training regimen for like when she was like 6, it's equipment that gets really hot. There are some things just for safety, but yeah, I taught her all the ratios. So I have a recipe of 20 grams into the grinder, 20 grams come out of a specially designed single dose grinder for zero retention.
Was she on probation for a period of time? I mean, did you have to kind of monitor this?
There was supervision, a certain amount of supervision required before I felt, fully comfortable that she could go in there on her own. I mean, now, like on Father's Day, like a latte comes out, like, wow, this is great. Like she actually knows how to do this stuff. But the great value for younger kids is the commercial style milk frothing is you get that micro texture that when you make hot chocolate, oh man, it's like next level. So there's downstream benefits beyond just coffee. Anything with steamed milk, you can up your game.
So what's your entry point of coffee? You said you were in Italy, and you were enjoying a lot of delicious espresso. Are you drinking regular espresso? Are you drinking something else?
Yeah, so the espresso culture was through the trip through Italy, I got kind of exposed to that and then started experimenting at home. And there is a bit of an acquired taste. And of course, if you're doing it well, it won't be quite as bitter because that's one of the byproducts of poor preparation. So I primarily do milk-based, so I'm doing lattes, cappuccinos. My wife does Americanos, so that means we're brewing an espresso, and then you add just hot water to make essentially like an American-style full 12-ounce mug of coffee. I will still do occasionally drip coffee, but primarily, like, for example, if we go camping or we go to an Airbnb for the weekend, I have a German-made high-precision hand grinder for travel purposes.
Seriously, who doesn't, really?
I know. You got to have one in your bag. I got a little kit. And there are 2 coffee makers that it's a great entryway. So I doing like a pour-over system. So there's a Kalita Wave, which is a Japanese, very like $30. It's a little flat bottom, but doing a pour-over. So that kind of like drip style where it's just kind of pouring through as opposed to like immersion, like French press.
So for somebody just maybe becoming interested in enjoying some better than average drip coffee, what's the best route to go? A pour over, or is a French press okay?
Yeah, well, they do different things. So French press is an immersion style. So that's you're grinding coffee, you're putting it in a big glass cup, and you're pouring water, and it's just sitting in there, just steeps. Usually a fuller body, a little richer, especially if you're using a darker roast coffee. Pour over can bring out a little bit more kind of a lighter, some of the different flavors and things like that. So a lot of it's just to taste, different methodologies. And these are all pretty inexpensive. So the best thing you can do for your, I mean, there's great filter coffee. You don't have to do espresso to do something really interesting. The best thing you can do is, I always talk about, is just a good grinder. And that's the like fundamental thing. And I ran an experiment at Rich's house one weekend to prove the point.
That's true.
But like the importance of just like freshly ground coffee. So don't buy pre-ground coffee if you can. There's plenty of options. You've got local roasters in almost everywhere in the world, or I use a subscription service, so I get coffee delivered every Friday. So it's within the optimal window of roasting time. Good coffee, any roaster that serves good coffee on the bag will have a roasted on date. So if on your bag of coffee it doesn't tell you when it was roasted, then you're not probably buying great coffee. But generally you want to consume the coffee within about 2 weeks of when it was roasted. Then it starts to kind of, the way it goes stale is kind of like a hockey stick chart in terms of the pace of it going stale. So a lot of people don't even realize they're drinking kind of stale coffee. It's not, it's a lower quality, and then they're poorly grinding it. They're not using great water, and so it's kind of a confluence of a bunch of things. Again, at an obsessive level, most people probably this doesn't matter at all. But if you are actually trying to like, hey, I bet this could taste a little bit better, you could get into some of these things. So the number one thing I try to recommend is just a good grinder. So if people are using a blade grinder for spices, that's terrible. You got to get into a burr grind set, which is either conical or flat. And
we actually did run the experiment, and Matt was just so beside himself that I had the blade. He's like, no, we're doing this right. And we went over to a local market and we did a fresh grind in a proper burr grinder, and we compared, and you can tell the difference because of the consistency of the grind. And Matt was so concerned about me, I got his hand-me-down burr grinder, and now he's right. It makes a difference. It does make a difference. It's good.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
What did you compare? The grinded beans in the store and the grinded beans against your grinder?
No, we didn't have a grinder, so it wasn't the most optimal. If I remember, Rich had this kind of crumpled up bag of pre-ground like Dunkin' Donuts coffee or something. I don't know. It was some like
he put the beans in a Ziploc and hit them with the hammer.
yeah, just out in the daylight,
Smashed
exposed
them up.
to UV. Oh my God! What
No,
are
I
you
think
doing?
I think I had one of the blade grinders, and I just mulched it up, and all these different particle sizes. You're like, you know what? And so we drove down right around the corner, and it's the same beans from the same place.
Exactly, but then freshly ground it. Yep.
Exactly.
And then brewed them both, did a blind test, and it was universal. So what you're searching for with the grinder, the reason why it's so beneficial is the consistency of the grind. So each of the particles being essentially the same size or close to the same size. So the more consistent, which is like the fundamental thing of all the aspects of great coffee, is like consistency in the water, consistency in pressure, consistency in time, consistency in the ratio, consistency in the grind. That's how you can then dial things up and down, so you can minimize the number of variables. So if you don't like, if it's a little bitter, or if it's over extracted, it's taking too long, you would loosen up the grind so it moves a little faster. If it's moving too fast, you can tighten up the grind to slow it down. And that changed the taste from something kind of gross to something, this is actually really good. So
when you go to somebody's house for the holidays and you see a container of Folgers sitting on the counter, do you go ballistic?
I don't go ballistic. I will say, the other aspect to me, I have some of these clearly obsessive tendencies. I'm actually a really easygoing, roll with the punches kind of person. So
yeah, I wasn't suggesting you had explosive anger. I'm sorry, Matt. But for someone who really has refined their taste buds.
Well, I've learned that you can like really upset people if you really launch into some, suggestion of a number of failings and missteps on their part. So, one, I'll either just accept it and you just go on, or
Not
like,
an icebreaker on Christmas Eve.
yeah, when it's family, like Rich, I'm like, hey, Rich, can I just help you out? And I know he's into gear and he's into.
But I want to learn.
Getting better at things. You like learning things,
Yeah.
and so some of it was just you just didn't know. And
Exactly.
I can't fault you for that. There's a time we all start somewhere, but so it was a chance to just kind of help him out. But
I think you got to know your audience, right? I mean, if somebody's curious and they want to get better at it, it's much different than.
yeah, that helps if they actually want to hear your advice.
Turns there's a life lesson. I took way too long to learn.
Yeah, you're on the old Dr. Pepper, I believe. That was your,
Well,
your stimulant of choice.
That's my coffee story.
I love that story. Tell it again, Rich, please.
I was drinking Dr. Pepper way too long as an adult. It was my caffeine drink in the morning, and it just becomes like anything else. It becomes a habit. And I decided I got to get off this. It's just not very good. So as I mentioned, work coffee is just terrible, and it smells so good, but I couldn't figure out why it was so terrible. So my first entry was in with a cappuccino, actually, and you're like, oh, okay, now I see the refinement. I see why people like this. It was very good, very tasty, but I did commit myself to stay away from the milk and the sugar. So I now drink it black.
That's amazing. I mean, you've gone full spectrum from like it's the most disgusting thing you've ever tasted. Now you drink it in the most like, it's like turpentine. It's like the rawest form of like a mineral you could possibly ingest. Just give it to me black.
He's as hairy as Sasquatch.
It's true. Well, it's a little bit of a health thing, but I do keep. I was very excited on a vacation once to try a cortado, and then I found out, Matt, you like those too. It's like a cappuccino, but just not quite as much milk. So you have a stronger coffee ratio. So I occasionally treat myself to one of those.
Yeah. So like just to give you some ratios, so like a typical like double shot of espresso might be 2 ounces. A cappuccino you might do 4 to 6 ounces of milk. The 2 ounces. A latte you might do like 8 or 10 ounces. So it's a little bit more milk typically. A cortado might be a 2 to 2, like 2 ounces espresso, 2 ounces of steamed milk. A macchiato, a true macchiato, would then just be a little dollop of milk, not like what you get at Starbucks. But so yeah, much more of the espresso flavor comes through, but a little bit of the sweetness of the milk.
So the milk designs that you put in, is that the graduate level of the apprentice certification class you offer?
Yeah, I haven't gotten a lot of traction with everyone else on learning latte art. I will say now that I've made just thousands since 2015, I make 2 to 4. If I'm making 2 for myself, or if I'm making some for my wife, 2 to 4 every day for like 8 years or something. You get pretty good at it. But so it's it's a nice way to demonstrate that you kind of know what you're doing. So if you're at a cafe and you see someone just dump the thing in, you can tell they don't really know what they're doing. But so when people do it, it's a nice touch. It shows that they are trained. They've perfected something. They've developed a craft. And then that's, I'll just say that's one of the great things I've enjoyed as a hobby. Well, it does help with some of my tendencies of, wanting to go deep and just kind of like understand things and unpack things. I do enjoy, one of the things I like is that side of the craft. So in the mornings, wake up, and the first thing I do is I make something, right? I've got ratios and timing, but I'm handcrafting something in the morning, and then I get to sit down and relax. So it brings a certain kind of peacefulness to it, too. It's not so labor intensive that it's drudgery. It's actually something I enjoy, the process of it. So
yeah, it's a bit of a ritual, right? It's a process that you can relax from. Similar to, I'm not a huge tea drinker, but for some people who are really into matcha, there's a process involved with that takes a few minutes before you actually get to start drinking the thing. And I think part of that ritual is just as much of the enjoyment as actually drinking the tea or coffee.
Yeah, it invokes all kinds of senses. Like Richie mentioned, the smell of coffee, and then there's, you start to work your brain a little bit. There's just a moment of relaxation. It slows things down a little. It's nice. So, but I wanted to ask, actually, so I know a little bit about Rich's story. So, Mike, what's your relationship with coffee? Let's hear your origin story.
Yeah, it's new. I didn't start drinking coffee too fairly recently, and I am not at the level of you or Rich.
Yeah. Is it primarily just to kind of wake you up, or do you actually enjoy the taste?
No,
I
similar to Rich. Yeah, I really enjoyed the smell for quite some time, but anytime I would drink it, it would taste burnt or bitter.
Good.
I think we might have to sign up for your certification program. Is it do we actually get something in the mail? Is there a process?
Well, it's 2 weeks, so it's like a camp. You sleep in my basement, and I have there's a combination of some study guides. You've got to learn some written tests. If you're at all interested, there are some easy ways to kind of get started. Some low expense ways that'll just brew great coffee. So you mentioned pour over before. That's a really great one. Like I said, a Kalita Wave is like $30. A little gooseneck kettle so you can control the flow, like $50 maybe. And then just getting a decent grinder, you might have to spend $100 or $200 for a decent burr grinder. But for a pretty modest investment, and that'll last you forever. These things will last you forever. And then it's just get good water, find a roaster in the area, experiment. It's a great platform for just experimenting, trying new things.
Well, Matt, this was hugely informative and a lot of fun too. Thanks for your insight and explanation of things. We thoroughly enjoyed that, and we might have to book you again for one of your other obsessive hobbies.
Yeah, there's a long list. We can go through them alphabetically. We can however you want. All right, guys. Well, thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, thanks for joining us.
All right, thanks. We'll catch you soon.
I was embarrassed to bring this up on the call when we were speaking with Matt. My usage of a Keurig machine, and especially the K-Cups. Now, I will say that I do feel really guilty about the environmental impact of those K-Cups, so I am trying to migrate to something different, even if it is a regular drip coffee maker. But I would not admit that I drink coffee from a K-Cup from a Keurig machine. And lastly, I was very reluctant to tell them that I had the cap off and I was adding water to the reservoir, and my nephew looks in there and says, there's a dead spider in there?
Yeah.
I scooped the spider out, and I don't know how many cups of Lavazza I've drank that have been somewhat filtered through the carcass of a dead spider, but I never noticed. I fished it out, and onward and upward in my Keurig Lavazza brewing.
Well, I think we want to know if you picked up any superhero traits from.
Not as of yet. It would be a nice upside to that cup of Lavazza.
Yeah, I think you have to be bitten by the spider, not just drink the dead remains from your Keurig to get the superpowers.
Maybe that's it. Yeah, the venom must still be active.
Smash that like button.